What do I do if all my child wants to do is play? How do I motivate them? How do I get them to do their work? Play is the hard work of childhood. One of the things that we have kind of forgotten, and I think we've forgotten it specifically because the schools push and push and push academics earlier and earlier and earlier, is the fact that children are meant, they're built, they are designed to learn through exploration and play up until they're around 6 or 7 years old. And that's why a lot of homeschoolers don't actually do any formal academics until closer to 7 years old. Kind of that year that your child would technically be starting first grade, somewhere in there. And it's because before that point, they naturally have a lot of energy. They naturally love to play pretend and imagine and, do kind of role-playing things like playing house or playing policeman or playing fireman. And we think, well, how can that be educational, right? Okay, no, they're not necessarily learning academics, but remember that you're not solely teaching them academics, right? You are helping to make your child well-rounded. And that means not only teaching them reading and writing and math and history and science, but it means also helping them to develop as a human being. And when they do things like play mommy and daddy or play house or play whatever, they're actually learning about different social roles and they're learning how to interact with other people. Think of a little girl who's playing house. She's practicing being a mommy. Isn't that kind of a big deal when you think about it? This is actually one of the reasons why I think every little boy should have a doll. Because don't daddies need to also know how to take care of children, right? But not just that. Things like using their imagination and exploring and experimenting with things. It makes all these different connections in the brain and it exposes them to so many different things that we don't even really think about as a parent, right? A lot of times we see it as like giving them something to keep them occupied. Here, have some Play-Doh. Here, here's the crayons, go color. But the things that they do in those kind of activities, it's actually very educational, not in an academic way, but in a well-rounded, helping their brain form kind of way. So if you have younger children in particular, and I'm thinking honestly, especially with boys, up to like second grade, play is okay. It's good to play. And if you've been watching my videos consistently, then you'll know in the very beginning, right, in the younger years, you're doing very little in terms of academics. You're spending a very short amount of time, like an hour spread out over the day. Not sit them down for an hour. Never try to do that, right? 5 or 10 minutes here, and then a nice long break. 5 or 10 minutes more, and then a nice long break. And even those little breaks, even those nice big chunky breaks, let them play because they're even learning with play. They're still in that mode. They're developmentally speaking. They have not transitioned yet to a mode where they are ready to sit down and focus on a workbook. Remember that all behavior is communication. So if your child is constantly wanting to play, that's them trying to communicate to you that they're not ready for this. They're not ready for academics yet. Now, with older children, okay, if you have just brought your children home, like if this is your first year of homeschooling, and you are dealing with kids that have been in school for a while, they need time to de-school, okay? They need time to detox from having been in that environment. And if it was a difficult time in that environment, they're going to need even more time to detox. So if you're having a hard time getting them to focus or getting them to concentrate or maybe just having a hard time getting them to want to do school, it's because they have such a bad taste in their mouth from the education they've been forced to have so far. And they need time to get out of that and to shake off all of that and to detox from it so that they can rediscover how they want to learn and what they want to learn and allow their natural curiosity to be reignited. They need time to play. Or more accurately, they need time to not do formal school. It has such a negative connotation for them right now. And one of the reasons a lot of us choose to homeschool is because we don't want our children to have a negative connotation of learning and education. We want them to be lifelong learners. We want them to be excited to learn new things and to be intrinsically motivated to want to learn. So in order to reignite that, if your child has been in school and it was a rough go and maybe this is their first year home, then they need the playtime, because they need that to, it's almost like therapy, like play therapy, right? To get out of that mindset so that they're open to homeschooling and to learning at home and to diving into a new version of education. So if you're a new parent, a new homeschooling parent, and you're saying, oh my gosh, all they ever want to do is play, I can't get them to focus, I can't get them to be motivated to do school, then maybe it's because they're not ready yet. And they need time away from that. Now, maybe you're homeschooling for different reasons. Maybe your child didn't have a bad time in school and they're happy to homeschool, but they still are very driven by their imagination. It's hard to get them to focus because their mind is constantly going on all these other things. They're maybe very creative, or maybe they're very kinesthetic. They want to move a lot. Then you have a couple different things to think about. First of all, maybe you have a very creative child for whom workbooks and textbooks and lectures and you just talking at them or whatever just isn't a good fit. It doesn't allow them to use their imagination. It doesn't allow them to be creative enough. You need to let them guide how you do school. You need to let your child lead, and then you kind of facilitate and figure out, okay, that's the direction they're going. Okay. I think of it as when you're watching curling, okay, like the one guy throws the, whatever it's called, and the other people are sweeping, okay? You're like the sweeper in front, okay? Your child is going this way. You need to get out in front of them and like make the path. So let them guide you with what they want to be doing, and then you figure out, okay, how can we fit in, whatever it is that our state requires us to do or whatever. How can I fit these in a way that's going to work with their creativity, work with their interests, and still check all of those boxes that we have to check to homeschool legally. Or maybe you just have a child who just doesn't like to sit still. It's not so much creativity, it's just energy. They just like to move. It kills me to think how many children who are just naturally more physically active and have a higher level of energy are almost always slapped with this ADHD label. It's not necessarily a totally different brain function. It's just that they have energy. So look for ways that you can incorporate that into what you do. One of my favorite things, use your windows as whiteboards. You can use whiteboard markers on windows. Sometimes just allowing them to stand while they're working and use big muscle movement, like writing, their math facts on the window or something like that, instead of these little fine motor things on paper, sitting at a desk, being still. Sometimes even just having that outlet for their energy, standing and doing big motor stuff, sometimes that's all they need. Sometimes they need more physical activity in between the times that they have to sit. So maybe you have to do shorter amounts of teaching and longer amounts of break in between the academics. And during those breaks, lots of big muscle movement. If you have like one of those little trampolines, let them bounce, get some of that energy out. Tell them, okay, I want you to run to the end of the cul-de-sac and back, or the end of the whatever, or around the house 3 times, or something to get to burn off some of that energy so it's easier for them to just sit and focus. Sometimes you just have to do your lessons while they're doing something. If you have a trampoline, if you have a kid who's high energy, chances are you already have a trampoline. So let them jump on the trampoline while you read. That's okay. When you're reading out loud to children, they do not have to be sitting next to you watching you read, which, let's face it, is kind of boring. It's okay to let them do something else, okay? Even if it's just having them sit at the table and play with Play-Doh, or draw. Tell them when you start, okay, I want you to draw the action that we're reading about, that we're, something that you talk about when you're reading, or something in the history lesson or whatever. Draw it or sculpt it or something like that. It gives their hands something to do. I have a friend who knits at church every Sunday. She brings her knitting. She sits way in the back, so she's not distracting anybody, but she's the kind of person who just can't sit still and she needs to get her energy out. And so it's easier for her to focus on the sermon if she's knitting. And so she sits back there and she knits prayer shawls. How super awesome is that, right? Maybe you have one of those kids. They just need to have their hands on stuff, doing something, getting some kind of sensory input to calm their mind enough that they can attend and they can focus and they can actually hear you and understand you and comprehend what you're doing. So if your child is having a hard time focusing, that means that their behavior is telling you something. And it's your job to figure out, what is it this child is telling me? Are they just not developmentally ready yet for academics? Or are they telling you, I'm not ready for academics yet because the academics I've been doing has totally crushed me and I need time away from that. I need to detox. Maybe they just need a period of time where they can just be allowed to play and not have to think about learning and education and school, okay? Or maybe they're telling you, this is just my personality. You've got to figure out how to work with me. This is just who I am. How can we work school around that? For those of you who have younger children, I'm thinking preschool, kindergarten, like 6 and younger, I will link an article that's all about how to homeschool preschool, kindergarten also. And for those of you who are dealing with kids who are older and they're just coming out of school, I will link an article to deschooling and what that means, what that looks like. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.